Welcome to Eat Sleep Crime. I am Jack Wilson, and I'll be your host for tonight. As the rain falls gently outside, relax your mind, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and sink into the shadows of today's true crime story. There is nothing to fear. At least not right now. Sleep well, if you can. The insistent tapping started small, a faint drumming against the glass that initially sounded like a branch scraping against the window pane in the pre-dawn wind. But it persisted, a rhythmic pulse that vibrated through the old, drafty frame of her bedroom window, a sound that burrowed its way into Sarah's sleep, transforming the comforting darkness into a landscape of creeping unease. She was 17, living in Havenwood, Indiana, a town where time seemed to slow to a crawl, where the most exciting event of the week was the arrival of the new issue of the Havenwood Gazette. Until now. Until 3:12 a.m. It was always 3:12 a.m. She checked her clock, the luminous green numbers glowing faintly in the dim light. 3:12 a.m. sharp. Precise. Like a scheduled visitation from something other. The tapping intensified, a frantic scratching now, as if something desperately wanted to be let in. She pulled the covers tighter around her, burying her face in the worn cotton, trying to ignore the prickling sensation on the back of her neck, the feeling of being watched. It was just the wind, she told herself, the old house settling, the usual nighttime symphony of creaks and groans. But this was different. This felt deliberate, malevolent. Gathering the courage that only fear can bestow, Sarah cautiously swung her legs out of the bed, the cold floorboards sending a shiver up her spine. The tapping hadn't stopped. She moved towards the window, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs, each beat echoing the incessant percussion on the glass. As she drew closer, she saw it. Nestled amongst the dusty sill, resting on the chipped paint, was a Polaroid photograph. The picture was grainy, the edges slightly blurred, but the image itself was undeniably clear. It was her, Sarah, sleeping soundly in her bed, the covers pulled up to her chin, her face serene, almost angelic in its peaceful slumber. But the angle was impossible. The photograph was taken from a position so close, so intimate, it felt as though the camera had been held inches from her face. The detail was unnerving. The slight furrow in her brow, the stray strand of hair escaping her braid, the delicate rise and fall of her chest. It was as if the photographer had leaned over her, had watched her sleep, and then captured the moment with chilling precision. A cold wave of nausea washed over her. This wasn't some random prank. This was a violation. An invasion. She felt a profound sense of vulnerability, a primal fear that went beyond simple fright. This was something far more sinister. The tapping stopped. Silence descended, thick and heavy, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of her clock, each tick a morbid reminder of the passing time and the unsettling presence that had, apparently, been in her room. Had been watching her. Sarah examined the Polaroid more closely. There was nothing remarkable about the background, just the familiar details of her room, the faded floral wallpaper, the chipped paint on the windowsill, the worn wooden floorboards. Nothing that could reveal the identity of the photographer. Yet, the intimacy of the shot, the chillingly close proximity, sent icy tendrils of fear down her spine. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like a prey animal suddenly aware of the predator's gaze. The next few nights were a blur of restless sleep, punctuated by the recurring tapping and a growing dread. Every creak of the old house, every rustle of leaves outside her window, sent a jolt of adrenaline through her. She kept her bedside lamp on, casting a weak, pale glow across the room, desperately trying to banish the shadows that seemed to writhe and twist in the periphery of her vision. Each night, a new Polaroid appeared on her windowsill, each one slightly more disturbing than the last. One showed her sitting up in bed, her eyes wide with fright, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. Another captured her huddled beneath the covers, her face buried in the pillows, her body shaking with silent sobs. The images weren't just snapshots. They were carefully composed scenes, meticulously documenting her escalating fear, her growing desperation. They were a macabre chronicle of her descent into terror. The photos were disturbing, but it was the consistency that truly unnerved her. The timing, the precision. The fact that every image was taken at precisely 3:12 a.m., the regularity of it all, was almost more unsettling than the images themselves. It felt less like a random act of vandalism and more like a meticulously planned ritual. Something was happening here, something far beyond a simple teenage prank. Something that defied logic and reason. As days bled into weeks, the tapping intensified, the Polaroids became more frequent, and Sarah found herself increasingly isolated, haunted by the unseen presence and the silent complicity of her parents. Their dismissive attitude only served to heighten her growing paranoia. Were they aware of what was happening? Were they involved? These questions echoed in the silence of her room, feeding her mounting anxiety and fueling her determination to unravel the mystery surrounding her. The grainy quality of the Polaroid images made identification of details difficult, yet the unnerving closeness of the shots, capturing even the slightest details of her expressions and posture, was enough to solidify the feeling of a deliberate, watchful presence. The feeling wasn't just a fleeting chill. It was a constant, suffocating pressure, as if an unseen eye was always trained upon her. The photographs served as tangible proof of the violation, a chilling testament to the intrusion into her most private moments. The house itself seemed to conspire against her, its age-old timbers groaning and creaking like skeletal fingers, the floorboards under her feet protesting with every step. The wind howled outside her window at 3:12 a.m. each night, a mournful wail that echoed the growing terror in her heart. The silence between the tapping was almost more unsettling than the tapping itself, a thick, suffocating silence that amplified the feeling of being watched, of being surrounded by unseen eyes. One night, after yet another night of relentless tapping, and a new Polaroid, showing her standing rigidly in front of her closet, fear finally overwhelmed her. She decided she couldn't handle this alone. She needed help. But from whom? Her parents' dismissive behavior had created a rift between them. Trusting them felt impossible. And the rest of Havenwood? They seemed strangely silent, their eyes darting away when she tried to speak of the unsettling events. This small town, once her sanctuary, now felt like a cage, a silent accomplice to her growing terror. Sarah's fear wasn't merely fear of the unknown. It was a visceral understanding that something deeply wrong was happening. The unsettling quality of the Polaroids wasn't just about the images themselves. It was about the blatant invasion of privacy, the deliberate choice of moments to capture, the feeling that she was being studied, cataloged, documented. It was the feeling of being hunted. And she knew, deep down, that this wasn't just a game. This was a prelude to something far more terrifying. The tapping had become a constant hum, a relentless reminder of the shadow that loomed over her. Always at 3:12 a.m., the question wasn't if the nightmare would end, but when. And what would happen then? The weight of unanswered questions pressed down on Sarah, heavier than the oppressive silence of the old house. Sleep had become a luxury she couldn't afford, each night a brutal replay of the tapping, the chilling Polaroids, the unsettling feeling of being watched. Her parents' persistent denial, their almost casual dismissal of her fears, had pushed her to the brink. They claimed ignorance, but their eyes held a flicker of something else. Fear? Guilt? Something that hinted at a secret they were desperately trying to keep hidden. She had to find answers, even if it meant confronting the darkness lurking within the very walls of her home. The attic door, located at the top of the creaking staircase in the hallway, had always been a forbidden zone. Dust motes danced in the weak beam of her flashlight as she cautiously pushed it open, the scent of decay and forgotten things washing over her. The air was thick with the smell of damp wood and mothballs, a chilling perfume of the past. Cobwebs hung like ghostly shrouds, draping themselves over discarded furniture and forgotten relics of previous generations. The attic was a graveyard of memories, a repository of forgotten lives. Sarah moved cautiously, her flashlight beam cutting through the oppressive gloom. Dust-covered trunks lay piled haphazardly, their contents unknown and possibly long lost to the annals of time. Shattered pieces of furniture lay discarded in dark corners, their once ornate designs now obscured by layers of dust and decay. The air hung heavy with a palpable sense of age, whispering stories of lives lived and lost within these decaying walls. She moved through the labyrinthine space, her footsteps echoing eerily in the vast emptiness. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of fabric, sent shivers down her spine. The silence, broken only by the occasional drip of water from a leaky roof, felt more sinister than the tapping had ever been. This was not just a house. It was a mausoleum, preserving not only forgotten possessions, but also forgotten secrets. A particular trunk, smaller than the others, and partially hidden behind a tattered tapestry, caught her eye. Intrigued, she pulled it out, its wooden surface slick with dust. The latch was rusty, resisting her initial attempts to open it. But with a determined tug, it finally gave way, revealing a hidden compartment beneath the lid. Inside, nestled amongst yellowed newspapers and brittle documents, were stacks of old photographs, letters, and diaries. Sarah carefully sifted through the contents, her flashlight beam illuminating faded ink and crumbling paper. One newspaper, its headlines blurred and faded with age, caught her attention. The date jumped out at her. August 14, 1979. A chill ran down her spine. The headline screamed, "Local girl vanishes without a trace." The article described the disappearance of a young girl named Emily Carter. The description sent a jolt of recognition through her. Emily's age, hair color, and even the description of her eyes mirrored the uncanny resemblance to the girl in the Polaroids. The article stated that Emily had vanished from her bedroom in the very same house, 20 years earlier, the same bedroom Sarah now occupied. A wave of nausea washed over her. It was a feeling of a dreadful premonition, a dark premonition that chilled her to the bone. The accompanying photograph was grainy, its edges blurred by time, but the young Emily was undeniably Sarah's doppelganger. The unsettling similarity between Emily and the girl in the Polaroids transformed the creepy images into threatening premonitions. Her heart pounded in her chest as she read the article's description of Emily's disappearance. Found missing from her bed, no signs of forced entry, no witnesses, no clues. Just emptiness. The unsettling parallel with Sarah's own experience was impossible to ignore. Further investigation into the attic's trove of forgotten documents revealed more disturbing details. Emily's diaries chronicled a gradual descent into fear, culminating in entries describing strange noises, sleepless nights, and a persistent feeling of being watched. Her descriptions of the unsettling events eerily mirrored Sarah's own experiences. She wrote of a mysterious tapping, a constant sound that invaded her sleep, a rhythmic drumming that echoed through her walls. There were entries that detailed the increasingly intense fear, the strange and unwelcome feeling of violation, an unbearable and chilling sense of being observed. And just as Sarah had done, Emily also mentioned feelings of isolation, of the silent complicity of her parents, suggesting their role in keeping a town-wide conspiracy. Amongst Emily's belongings, Sarah found a small, leather-bound book, a diary. Its pages were filled with a delicate, looping script that hinted at a young girl's thoughts and anxieties. As she read, a chilling pattern emerged. Emily described a growing sense of dread, unsettling nighttime sounds, and the unwavering belief that someone, or something, was watching her from the shadows. One particularly chilling entry detailed a series of Polaroids that had mysteriously appeared on her windowsill. Polaroids that eerily mirrored the ones Sarah had found. Emily's entries chronicled her growing terror, culminating in a final entry that spoke of a desperate need for help, of a terrifying presence that had invaded her life, and a fear that the nightmare would never end. The diary ended abruptly. The last few pages were ripped out, leaving a gaping hole in the narrative. a void that mirrored the chasm of the unresolved mystery. The silence of the attic became even more intense. Sarah closed the diary, her hands trembling, the reality of the parallel striking the heavy chord in her heart. She was not merely experiencing a series of random, terrifying events. She was reliving a nightmare, a chilling repetition of a tragedy that had occurred 20 years earlier, in the very same room. The realization settled upon her with the crushing weight of a tombstone. The tapping, the Polaroids, the invasion of privacy. These weren't random acts of terror. They were part of a pattern, a cycle of fear that spanned decades, linking her to the unsolved disappearance of Emily Carter. Havenwood, once a picture of quiet tranquility, now felt like a stage for a macabre reenactment of a forgotten tragedy. The town held secrets. Secrets it had buried deep, beneath the surface of its placid facade. And Sarah was now digging them up. The discovery didn't just fuel her fear, but also ignited a fierce determination within her. A desperate need to uncover the truth, to break the cycle, to ensure that history would not repeat itself. She was no longer just a victim. She was a detective in a chilling mystery, a mystery with roots far deeper than the attic's dust-covered relics. The truth, she realized, was buried beneath layers of lies, secrets, and the suffocating silence of Havenwood itself. And she would uncover it, no matter the cost. The attic air hung heavy with the scent of forgotten things, a suffocating silence pressing in on Sarah. She descended the creaking stairs, the weight of Emily Carter's story settling heavily in her chest, a cold knot of dread tightening with each step. The knowledge she held, the horrifying parallel between her own experience and Emily's, spurred her to confront her parents. She needed answers, needed to break through the wall of denial that had surrounded her since the tapping began. She found her parents in the kitchen, her mother meticulously arranging wildflowers in a vase, her father engrossed in the evening news. The casual normalcy of the scene felt jarring, a stark contrast to the chilling discoveries she had made in the attic. The comfortable silence that usually enveloped the family seemed almost mocking now, a cruel reminder of the secrets they were keeping. "Mom, Dad," Sarah began, her voice trembling slightly, "I need to talk to you about something important." Her mother glanced up, a fleeting flicker of apprehension in her eyes. Her father didn't look up, his gaze fixed on the television screen, a news report about a local charity event filling the air. Sarah took a deep breath, bracing herself for their reaction. "I found something in the attic," she said, pulling out the faded newspaper clipping detailing Emily Carter's disappearance. "This is Emily. She disappeared from this house 20 years ago." Silence. A thick, suffocating silence that felt heavier than the oppressive atmosphere of the attic. Her mother's hand froze mid-arrangement, a single wildflower slipping from her grasp and falling to the floor. Her father finally looked up, his eyes widening in what Sarah perceived as a mixture of fear and surprise. "What are you talking about, Sarah?" Her mother finally asked, her voice strained, laced with an unsettling calmness that only amplified her underlying tension. Sarah held up the photograph of Emily, the grainy image showcasing an uncanny resemblance to the girl in the Polaroids. "This girl, she looks just like the girl in the pictures I found on my windowsill." The words tumbled out, each syllable charged with emotion, a mix of fear, confusion, and burgeoning anger. Her father rose from his chair, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by an unsettling stiffness. He moved towards Sarah, his movements oddly precise, almost mechanical. "Sarah," he began, his voice low and firm, "you need to forget about this. It's not important." "Not important." Sarah's voice rose, a tremor of disbelief and anger coloring her tone. "This girl vanished from her bedroom, the same bedroom I'm sleeping in. And you're telling me it's not important." Her mother stepped forward, her hand resting on her husband's arm. "Your father's right, Sarah," she said, her voice soft but firm, laced with an unsettling hint of command. "It's all in your imagination. You're overworked, stressed. You need to rest." "No." Sarah insisted, her voice rising. "It's not in my imagination. I found her diary. It's all there. The tapping, the pictures, the fear. Everything is the same." Her parents exchanged a look, a silent communication passing between them that excluded Sarah. The look was filled with a mixture of fear, guilt, and something else. Something dark and unsettling that Sarah couldn't quite define. It was a look that solidified her suspicion that they knew more than they were letting on. Their denial was no longer just denial. It was a carefully constructed wall, a fortress built on lies and secrets. "We don't know anyone named Emily Carter," her father said, his voice tight. His eyes flickered nervously towards her mother, a fleeting moment of something akin to panic flashing across his face before he masked it with a forced calm. "But the diary," Sarah began, but her parents cut her off. "The attic is full of old things, Sarah," her mother interrupted, her voice still eerily calm. "Old journals, old letters, old memories. It's easy to get confused." Their evasiveness only fueled Sarah's suspicions. Their reactions, far from dismissing her fears, confirmed them. The casual dismissal, the forced calmness, the nervous glances exchanged between them. It all pointed towards a deliberate attempt to conceal something significant, something terrifying. The casual normalcy of their initial response was nothing more than a carefully constructed facade designed to mask a much deeper and more sinister truth. The polite conversation disintegrated into a heated argument. Sarah pressed them, demanding answers, but their responses became increasingly evasive, their words laced with a growing sense of panic. They denied any knowledge of Emily Carter, insisted that the events Sarah described were mere figments of her imagination, products of stress and overwork. But their eyes betrayed them, their carefully crafted composure cracking under the pressure of Sarah's relentless questioning. The forced calmness gave way to an underlying nervousness, a tremor in their voices, a subtle shift in their posture. The realization hit Sarah with the force of a physical blow. They weren't just denying knowledge of Emily, they were actively trying to hide something. The subtle nuances of their body language, the fleeting expressions of fear and guilt that betrayed their carefully constructed masks, those were not the reactions of innocent bystanders. This was more than just denial. It was a conspiracy, a carefully orchestrated cover-up, a town-wide secret concealed beneath the veneer of Havenwood's quiet, unassuming charm. The more she pressed, the more their denial grew intense, their fear more palpable. The evening unfolded into a tense standoff, a silent battle of wills between Sarah and her parents. The comfortable family kitchen, once a haven of warmth and security, now felt like a cold, sterile interrogation room, the air thick with suspicion and unspoken truths. Sarah felt a chill crawl up her spine, a chilling premonition growing stronger with each passing moment. This wasn't just a mystery surrounding Emily Carter. It was a family secret, a deep-rooted conspiracy far more sinister than she had ever imagined. And at the heart of it all were her parents, their silence a deafening scream of concealed guilt and fear. The comfortable haven of her family home had transformed into a terrifying enigma, its walls closing in on her, suffocating her with secrets and lies. The truth, she knew, was hidden somewhere, buried deep beneath layers of denial, fear, and a conspiracy that stretched far beyond the walls of her home and into the very heart of Havenwood itself. And she was determined to unearth it, no matter the cost. The game had changed, and Sarah was now playing for much higher stakes. The tapping on her window was no longer a mere annoyance. It was a warning, a chilling reminder of the dark secrets that lurked beneath the surface of her seemingly idyllic life. The next morning, Sarah decided to take a different approach. Confronting her parents directly had yielded nothing but evasiveness and fear. She needed to find answers outside the confines of her home, within the very fabric of Havenwood itself. She began her investigation subtly, discreetly, starting with the town's elderly residents. These were the people who had lived through Emily Carter's disappearance, the ones who might hold the key to unlocking Havenwood's tightly guarded secrets. Her first target was Mrs. Gable, a frail woman who lived in a quaint Victorian house across the street from the local bakery. Mrs. Gable, with her snow-white hair and eyes that held the weight of decades, had always been a fixture in Havenwood. She seemed to know everyone, to have witnessed every ebb and flow of the town's history. Sarah approached cautiously, holding a plate of freshly baked cookies from the bakery. "Good morning, Mrs. Gable," she began, her voice soft and friendly. "I was wondering if you might know anything about Emily Carter." The old woman's wrinkled face tightened, her eyes clouding over with a look that was a mixture of sadness and apprehension. She took the cookies with a trembling hand, her silence stretching into an uncomfortable pause. The pleasant morning air seemed to thicken, laden with an unspoken tension that hung heavy between them. Finally, Mrs. Gable spoke, her voice a low whisper barely audible above the chirping of birds. "Emily Carter, such a sad story," she murmured, her gaze drifting towards the overgrown rose bushes in her garden. "A terrible thing happened here, a long time ago. Things people would rather forget." Sarah pressed gently, "Do you remember what happened?" Mrs. Gable shook her head, her gaze shifting nervously. "Some things are best left buried," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's not just Emily. Havenwood holds secrets that are better left untouched. They bring sorrow and nothing good." She looked at Sarah, her eyes filled with a warning. "Some things, dear, are better left undisturbed. Believe me, it's for the best." Sarah, however, wasn't easily deterred. She spent the next few days subtly probing other longtime residents, people whose memories stretched back to the 1970s. Each interaction followed a similar pattern. Initial pleasantries, carefully phrased question about Emily Carter, and then a sudden shift in demeanor, a wall of silence, a quick change of subject. She encountered hushed whispers and furtive glances in the local grocery store, averted eyes in the town square, and abrupt silences during casual conversations. Every interaction was saturated with an unspoken understanding, a collective refusal to discuss the past, a shared knowledge of something dreadful that lay buried beneath the idyllic facade of Havenwood. The town's seemingly tranquil atmosphere was punctuated by subtle tremors of unease, an undercurrent of dread that spoke volumes about the town's concealed history. At the local library, Sarah found a dusty town history book that mentioned Emily Carter's disappearance in a single vague sentence. It was a cursory mention, devoid of details, merely a footnote in the town's otherwise meticulously documented history. The omission was jarring, more revealing than any explicit description could have been. It spoke of a deliberate act of erasure, of a shared conspiracy to bury a painful truth. The old librarian, Mr. Abernathy, a man with a perpetually furrowed brow and eyes that seemed to hold a lifetime of unspoken stories, watched her closely as she read. When she finished, he cleared his throat, a nervous tremor in his voice. "That's all we have on Emily Carter, dear," he said, his voice tight with a hidden tension. "It's a sad story, one that is better left forgotten." His gaze darted towards the window, almost as if he feared being overheard. As Sarah continued her investigation, the chilling undercurrent of secrecy intensified. The town's quiet charm seemed to morph into something sinister, the friendly smiles concealing a deep-seated fear, a sense of shared guilt. Each casual conversation felt heavy with unspoken truths, each interaction a delicate dance around a subject that was strictly forbidden. The local diner, usually a bustling hub of community life, felt eerily quiet, the usual cheerful chatter replaced by an unnerving silence. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, seemed to avoid eye contact, serving Sarah with a hesitant, almost fearful politeness. When Sarah mentioned Emily Carter, the waitress's hand trembled as she refilled Sarah's coffee cup. Her response a single, nervous, "I don't remember her." One evening, Sarah was walking home from the library when she overheard a group of older women whispering on a park bench. Their voices were low and hushed, their words barely audible. Yet Sarah caught fragments of their conversation. 20 years. Never speak of it. Must be kept hidden. Protect the town. The fragments were enough to confirm her suspicions. It wasn't just her parents. It was a town-wide conspiracy. A collective effort to bury a dark secret. To erase Emily Carter from Havenwood's memory. The idyllic image of her hometown was cracking, revealing a chilling underbelly of suppressed truths and unspoken fears. The quiet town held its breath, a silent pact sealing the lips of its residents, a collective vow to protect a secret that Sarah was determined to unearth, no matter the cost. The tapping on her window continued, a persistent, chilling reminder of the mystery unfolding before her. It wasn't just a random event. It was a summons, an invitation to delve deeper into the darkness that cloaked Havenwood. Every day, the feeling of isolation intensified, the weight of the town's secrets pressing down on her, suffocating her in an atmosphere of fear and suspicion. Yet, Sarah's determination only grew stronger. The whispers, the averted gazes, the hushed conversations, they all fueled her resolve, confirming her suspicions and propelling her forward. She was no longer simply investigating a cold case. She was fighting against a town-wide conspiracy, a battle against a silent, suffocating darkness that had consumed Havenwood for 20 years. The fight was hers alone, and she was prepared to face it, whatever the consequences. The truth, she knew, was out there, hidden beneath layers of denial and fear waiting to be unearthed. And she would find it. The tapping persisted. Night after night, precisely at 3:12 a.m., the rhythmic knock against her window shattered the fragile peace of Sarah's sleep. It was no longer the gentle tap-tap-tap she'd initially dismissed as branches swaying in the wind. This was a sharper, more insistent percussion, a relentless rhythm that pounded against her eardrums, a sound that burrowed into her bones and chilled her to the core. The Polaroids intensified the terror. Initially, they were unsettling snapshots, capturing her sleeping form from an unnervingly close distance. Now, they were evolving, each new image slightly more menacing than the last. The angle changed, the focus shifted, the lighting altered subtly, creating a growing sense of invasion and dread. One picture showed her sleeping peacefully, a single long shadow stretched across the room, originating from a point outside her window, a shadow that seemed to possess a life of its own. Another showed her bed sheets pulled slightly back, as if an unseen hand had reached out, a touch that sent a shiver down her spine. The quality of the photos themselves also worsened, becoming grainy and distorted, as if rushed or taken in a desperate hurry, adding a new dimension of urgency and threat. The initial curiosity had been replaced by an overwhelming fear, a chilling premonition that something truly malevolent was watching her, stalking her from the shadows. The tapping was no longer a mere curiosity. It was a warning, a relentless drumbeat counting down to an unknown catastrophe. Sleep became a battlefield, each night a desperate struggle against encroaching terror, each dawn a fragile reprieve from the nightmare. Sarah's room, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison, the walls closing in, the darkness pressing down. She barricaded her window with heavy furniture, but the tapping continued, a maddening persistence that seemed to penetrate the wood and resonate throughout her room, a sound that spoke of a force beyond her comprehension. The once familiar sounds of her home, the creak of the floorboards, the gentle hum of the refrigerator, now seemed amplified, distorted, laden with a sinister implication. Every shadow held the promise of something lurking. Every whisper seemed to carry a hidden threat. Paranoia gnawed at her sanity. She started seeing things, or rather, she started interpreting things in a sinister light. A stray branch tapping against the house became the harbinger of doom. The rustling of leaves outside her window became the stealthy approach of a silent predator. The quiet hum of the electricity became a malevolent whisper, an unseen force trying to communicate. Her own heartbeat became a terrifying drumbeat, echoing the relentless tapping, a physical manifestation of her mounting fear. Days bled into nights, marked only by the relentless 3:12 a.m. intrusion. She attempted to confide in her parents, but their responses were met with a dismissive wave of the hand, a forced reassurance that played on her fears while offering no real solutions. Their calm, bordering on unnervingly placid demeanor, seemed to intensify her fears, adding a layer of dread to the already suffocating atmosphere within her home. Desperate for answers, Sarah embarked on a more thorough investigation of her own home. She scoured every corner, every cupboard, every drawer, looking for clues, for anything that might explain the unsettling events unfolding around her. The basement, with its musty scent and lurking shadows, seemed particularly ominous. The ancient wooden floorboards groaned under her weight, as if resisting her search, the silence of the space oppressive, thick with untold secrets. She pulled back a section of old carpeting in a far corner, revealing bare floorboards, darkened and worn by time. There, deeply embedded in the wood, she discovered a small, almost invisible crack. Reaching for her flashlight, she shined the beam into the narrow crevice and gasped. Within the dark space, she saw it, a small, worn wooden box, seemingly untouched for decades. Her heart hammered in her chest as she wrestled the ancient box free, her hands trembling with a mixture of fear and anticipation. As she lifted the box into the dim light, she noticed a faint inscription on its lid, barely visible beneath layers of dust and grime. The inscription was etched deeply into the wood, worn smooth by time, but still legible. It read, "Emily's Secret." With a mix of trepidation and resolve, Sarah carefully opened the box. Inside, nestled amongst faded velvet, she found a collection of old photographs, letters, and a small, leather-bound diary. The photographs depicted a young girl, roughly Sarah's age, with bright eyes and a cheerful smile. The girl was clearly Emily Carter. The letters were addressed to "My dearest Emily," written in a delicate script, and seemed to be filled with expressions of love, worry, and an unspoken fear. The leather-bound diary, the most intriguing item, appeared to be locked. The diary's lock was simple, and Sarah managed to open it with little effort. Inside, written in the same elegant script as the letters, were chilling entries chronicling the girl's final days. Emily's entries spoke of a growing sense of dread, of being watched, of a mysterious presence in the house, of a tapping that grew increasingly relentless, a tapping that mirrored the tapping Sarah was now experiencing. Emily described hearing whispers in the walls, seeing shadows move in the periphery of her vision, feeling a constant sensation of being observed. Her writings detailed a slow descent into paranoia, a creeping sense of dread that consumed her world, until it culminated in a terrifying encounter with an unseen entity, one that left her traumatized and filled with a deep, unshakable fear. Sarah read Emily's final entry, penned on the eve of her disappearance. "They're coming for me," Emily had written. "The tapping won't stop. I can feel them watching me, waiting. There's something under the floorboards, something that wants me gone, something that won't let me leave." The final entry was abruptly broken off mid-sentence, the page stained with a mysterious dark substance, as if blood. Sarah's fear spiraled into a chilling certainty. This wasn't just a coincidence. This was a connection, a terrifying link between her experiences and the unsolved mystery of Emily Carter's disappearance. The tapping, the Polaroids, the town's silence. It all pointed to something far more sinister than she could have ever imagined. The idyllic facade of Havenwood had finally cracked, revealing a horrifying truth that threatened to consume her, a truth that was deeply rooted in the very foundation of her home, hidden beneath the floorboards of her basement in the dark space that held Emily's secret. The tapping intensified, a malevolent reminder of the lurking danger, as if the unseen entity was growing bolder, more confident, its presence more palpable than ever before. The next night, the tapping came earlier, louder, more insistent, accompanied by a cold gust of wind that slammed the window against its frame, shaking the house to its foundations. Sarah huddled beneath her covers, paralyzed by a chilling fear, the rhythmic tapping intensifying into a pounding percussion, a frantic rhythm that echoed her own racing heartbeat. She could feel a presence in the room, a sinister energy that emanated from the darkness beyond her window, an unseen force that threatened to invade her sanctuary and drag her into the depths of a terrifying abyss. As the minutes crawled by, the tapping reached a crescendo, culminating in a violent crash, a sound of glass shattering, accompanied by a blood-curdling scream, followed by an eerie silence. The discovery of Emily Carter's diary was only the beginning. The chilling entries, the cryptic final message, the mysterious dark stain. It all fueled a fire within Sarah, a burning need to understand what happened to Emily, a need that transcended simple curiosity and morphed into a desperate quest for survival. The tapping, once a distant, unsettling sound, now echoed in her mind, a constant, relentless reminder of the unseen evil that lurked in the shadows. Armed with Emily's diary and the collection of old photographs, Sarah embarked on a new phase of her investigation, one that would lead her beyond the confines of her own home and into the heart of Havenwood's tightly knit, yet strangely secretive community. Her first stop was the Havenwood Police Department, a small, unassuming building that held within its walls the secrets of the town's past, secrets that were now inextricably linked to her own terrifying present. The police chief, a grizzled man with weary eyes and a perpetually furrowed brow, greeted Sarah with a mixture of suspicion and thinly veiled indifference. He produced Emily Carter's file, a thin, dusty folder that seemed to symbolize the town's collective effort to forget the girl who vanished without a trace 20 years ago. The official report was cursory, stating that Emily had simply wandered off and was presumed lost. There was no mention of the tapping, the shadows, the whispers, nothing that even hinted at the supernatural elements Sarah had uncovered in Emily's diary. The case had been closed swiftly, deemed a simple runaway situation, a convenient explanation that swept a much larger and darker truth under the rug. Sarah pushed further, pressing the chief for details, questioning the inconsistencies, the lack of a thorough investigation. His responses were evasive, his words carefully chosen, his demeanor suggesting he knew far more than he was willing to disclose. He dismissed her concerns, attributing her fears to teenage anxieties and an overactive imagination, a response that only served to deepen her suspicion of a larger conspiracy. The official police report was a carefully constructed narrative, designed to conceal a more sinister truth, a truth that the town's elders seemed determined to keep buried. Disheartened but not defeated, Sarah turned to the Havenwood Public Library, hoping to find additional information about Emily Carter and her family. The library, a quiet, dimly lit haven filled with the scent of old paper and decaying books, held within its dusty shelves a wealth of local history, a history that Sarah was determined to unearth. She spent days poring over old newspapers, yearbooks, and local records, piecing together fragments of Emily's life, searching for any clues that might shed light on her disappearance. The accounts she found were fragmented, incomplete, filled with conflicting testimonies and unexplained events. Some recalled Emily as a bright, cheerful girl, loved by her peers. Others described her as withdrawn, somewhat eccentric, prone to fits of anxiety and fear. There were whispers of strange occurrences in her neighborhood, of unsettling sounds heard late at night, of shadows glimpsed in the periphery of vision, rumors that were dismissed as childhood fantasies or mere coincidence. Yet, a disturbing pattern began to emerge, a recurring theme of unexplained phenomena surrounding Emily's life, a dark undercurrent that seemed to have been deliberately suppressed. Interviews with Emily's former classmates and teachers yielded a similar pattern of conflicting memories. Some vividly recalled her disappearance, their faces etched with a sadness that spoke of unresolved grief. Others seemed to have repressed the memory, their responses vague, their recollections incomplete, as if a collective amnesia had enveloped the town, shielding them from the unsettling truth. Sarah sensed a reluctance to discuss Emily, a veiled fear that permeated their conversations, a reluctance that hinted at a dark secret the town was determined to protect. Sarah's research revealed a surprising number of inconsistencies in the official records, discrepancies in witness statements, and gaps in the timeline of events surrounding Emily's disappearance. These inconsistencies weren't accidental omissions. They seemed deliberately crafted, as if someone had meticulously constructed a false narrative to conceal a much larger and more terrifying truth. The more Sarah dug, the more she realized that Emily's disappearance wasn't a simple case of a runaway girl. It was a meticulously planned event, orchestrated to hide something far more sinister, something that threatened to unravel the very fabric of Havenwood society. The deeper Sarah delved, the more she discovered that the town's idyllic facade concealed a history of unexplained disappearances, a pattern of unsettling events that stretched back decades. The town elders, the pillars of the community, seemed to be at the center of this web of deceit, their carefully constructed narratives masking a dark, unsettling secret. The silence surrounding Emily's disappearance wasn't simply the silence of grief. It was the chilling silence of a conspiracy, a collective effort to suppress a truth that was far too terrifying to confront. The pieces of the puzzle slowly began to fit together, revealing a horrifying picture, a picture that painted Havenwood not as a peaceful, idyllic town, but as a place haunted by a dark, malevolent presence, a presence that had claimed Emily Carter and now seemed determined to claim Sarah as its next victim. The tapping intensified, the Polaroids continued to arrive, each new development adding another layer of terror, another chilling reminder of the lurking danger. Sarah knew that she was in grave danger, that she was walking a path towards a terrifying confrontation, a confrontation that would determine not only her fate, but the fate of Havenwood itself. The truth, once uncovered, had the power to shatter the town's carefully constructed reality, revealing a darkness that had been concealed for far too long, a darkness that threatened to consume them all. The clock ticked, the tapping grew louder, and Sarah knew that time was running out. The attic's secrets, chilling as they were, felt like a mere appetizer compared to the main course awaiting in the basement. Emily Carter's diary had mentioned a hidden room, a place where the shadows whisper, a phrase that sent a shiver down Sarah's spine even now, days later. Following the cryptic instructions scribbled in faded ink, Sarah descended the creaking wooden stairs leading to the basement, a dimly lit space that smelled of damp earth and forgotten things. The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of mildew and decay. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of light filtering through a grimy window high above, illuminating a scene of disarray. Old furniture, shrouded in white sheets, stood like ghostly sentinels, their shapes barely discernible in the gloom. Empty boxes, their contents long since dispersed or forgotten, lay scattered haphazardly, their cardboard sides crumbling under the weight of time and neglect. The floor, uneven and cracked, seemed to groan under Sarah's weight, each step echoing eerily in the oppressive silence. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a drumbeat accompanying the unsettling creaks and groans of the old house. She felt a primal fear, a sense of unease that transcended simple apprehension and burrowed deep into her bones. It was the kind of fear that clung to you like a shadow, a constant, oppressive presence that whispered warnings in the language of the subconscious. This was not the basement of a typical suburban home. This was a repository of forgotten memories, a silent witness to secrets buried deep within the very foundations of the house, and possibly the town itself. Emily's diary had described a hidden passage, concealed behind a loose section of the wall near the old coal bin. Sarah traced her fingers along the dusty brickwork, her touch tentative, her breath held captive in her chest. The diary's vague instructions were little help. It mentioned a specific pattern in the bricks, a sequence of 3 smaller bricks interspersed amongst larger ones. After several minutes of careful examination, her fingers brushed against a slightly different texture, a subtle variation in the mortar. A gentle push, and a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow, dark passageway. The passage was barely wide enough for Sarah to squeeze through, the air thick with the smell of stale earth and something else. Something indescribably ancient and unsettling. A musty odor, reminiscent of old bones and forgotten things, clung to the air, a chilling perfume that heightened her growing sense of dread. Clutching the flashlight tightly in her hand, she edged forward, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The passage sloped downward, leading into the deeper recesses of the basement, a place where the darkness seemed to press in on her from all sides. The passage opened into a small, square room, its walls lined with rough-hewn stone. The room was utterly devoid of light, an absolute darkness that felt almost tangible. Sarah fumbled for the switch, but found none. The silence here was absolute, broken only by the frantic thump of her own heart. She switched on her flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness, revealing a scene of utter desolation. Cobwebs draped the walls like ghostly shrouds, their sticky strands catching in her hair as she moved. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, and a strange, almost metallic tang hung in the air. In the center of the room, on a rough-hewn stone table, sat a collection of items, their purpose and significance utterly enigmatic. There was an old, tarnished silver locket, its surface etched with strange symbols. A small, leather-bound book with pages filled with indecipherable script. A collection of dried herbs and flowers, their once vibrant colors now faded to a dull, dusty brown, and a small wooden box, intricately carved with images that seemed both familiar and utterly alien. The locket felt strangely warm to the touch, its surface radiating a faint, almost imperceptible heat. Sarah opened it cautiously, revealing a faded photograph of a young girl, her face eerily similar to Emily Carter's. The girl in the photograph was wearing a dress identical to the one depicted in the old Polaroids that had been left on her windowsill. A chill ran down Sarah's spine, a cold wave of realization washing over her. This was more than just a coincidence. This was a direct connection, a link between the past and the present, the living and the dead. The small leather-bound book proved even more unsettling. Its pages were filled with a strange script, not English, but a series of symbols and characters that resembled no known language. Sarah felt a prickling sensation on her skin, as if the book itself were radiating a negative energy, a malevolent presence that seemed to feed on her fear. She closed it quickly, her fingers lingering on the cold, smooth leather. The dried herbs and flowers, upon closer examination, appeared to be arranged in a specific pattern, a kind of ritualistic arrangement that suggested some sort of dark magic or ancient ceremony. The air around them hummed with a faint, almost imperceptible energy, a sense of unease that settled deep within Sarah's bones. Finally, there was the small wooden box. Its intricate carvings depicted scenes of a strange, almost otherworldly landscape, a land populated by creatures that were both terrifying and strangely beautiful. The box was locked, secured with a small brass latch. Sarah tried to force it open, but it resisted her efforts, its wood surprisingly strong and unyielding. As she examined the box more closely, Sarah noticed a tiny inscription carved into the underside of the lid, a series of numbers etched so delicately they were almost invisible. 3:12. The exact time the tapping began. The exact time the Polaroids appeared on her windowsill. The exact time, according to Emily's diary, that the disappearances began. The numbers were a chilling confirmation of her darkest suspicions, a link that connected the unsettling events of the present to the mysteries of Havenwood's long-forgotten past. This basement, this hidden room, was more than just a repository of forgotten things. It was the epicenter of a dark and ancient evil, one that had claimed Emily Carter and now threatened to claim Sarah as its next victim. The discovery of the hidden room was only the beginning. The unsettling objects within it, the cryptic symbols, the chilling atmosphere, they all hinted at a deeper, darker truth, a truth that lay buried beneath the surface of Havenwood's seemingly idyllic facade. The more Sarah uncovered, the more she realized the true extent of the conspiracy. a conspiracy that reached far beyond the confines of her own home, stretching into the very heart of the town. The weight of the secret pressed down on her, a crushing burden that threatened to overwhelm her. She knew that she couldn't stop now. She had to unravel the mysteries of the basement, of Emily Carter's disappearance, and of the strange, unsettling events plaguing her. The tapping on her window grew louder, a constant, relentless reminder that time was running out. The shadows in the basement seemed to watch her, their darkness a palpable threat, a promise of the terrors that awaited her. Sarah's journey had only just begun, and the path ahead was fraught with peril. The secrets of Havenwood, its dark history, and the malevolent presence lurking within its shadowed corners were waiting to be revealed, a revelation that would forever change her life and the lives of everyone around her. The chilling discovery in the basement had left Sarah shaken, but not broken. The weight of the secrets she'd unearthed pressed down on her, a heavy cloak of dread, but it also fueled her resolve. The cryptic symbols, the unsettling artifacts, the very air of the hidden room, all screamed of a conspiracy far larger than she'd initially imagined. It wasn't just a personal mystery anymore. It was a town-wide secret, one that had been meticulously buried for 20 years, and she was determined to unearth it, no matter the cost. Her first target was Mrs. Henderson, the elderly librarian, a woman whose quiet demeanor masked a sharp intelligence and a lifetime of unspoken knowledge. Mrs. Henderson had been a close friend of Emily Carter's mother, a fact Sarah had unearthed during her research at the local historical society. The library, with its hushed atmosphere and towering shelves of forgotten stories, felt like a fitting place to begin her confrontation. The library was nearly empty when Sarah arrived, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the polished wooden floors. Mrs. Henderson sat behind the counter, her silver hair neatly pinned, her eyes peering over the rims of her spectacles. Sarah approached hesitantly, her heart pounding a nervous rhythm against her ribs. "Mrs. Henderson," Sarah began, her voice barely a whisper, "I need to ask you some questions about Emily Carter." Mrs. Henderson's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of apprehension crossing her face. "Emily Carter," she repeated, her voice low and measured. "That was a long time ago, dear. A sad time." "I know," Sarah replied, "but I've found some things. Some things that suggest Emily's disappearance wasn't an accident." Sarah carefully laid out her findings, showing Mrs. Henderson the photograph from the locket, Polaroids, and a detailed sketch of the strange symbols from the leather-bound book. As Sarah spoke, the librarian's initial composure began to crumble. Her hands trembled slightly, her eyes darting nervously around the room. The silence between them hung heavy, thick with unspoken truths. I don't know what to say," Mrs. Henderson stammered, her voice barely audible. "It was a long time ago. We all tried to forget." Sarah pressed on, her questions becoming more direct, more probing. She delved into Emily's life, her friendships, her routines, anything that might offer a clue to her disappearance. With each question, Mrs. Henderson's discomfort grew more palpable, her evasiveness becoming increasingly obvious. Sarah sensed she was close to a breakthrough, that the weight of the past was beginning to crack the facade of the town's collective silence. Next, Sarah turned her attention to Sheriff Brody, a man whose gruff exterior hid a deep-seated weariness, a weariness that suggested years spent guarding a secret too heavy to bear. He had been the lead investigator on Emily's case 20 years ago, a case he'd officially closed as a runaway, despite the lack of any real evidence to support that conclusion. The sheriff's office was a stark contrast to the quiet sanctuary of the library. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and dust, the walls lined with faded photographs and outdated crime scene reports. Sheriff Brody, a man whose face seemed carved from granite, sat behind his desk, his gaze intense and unwavering. Sarah presented him with the same evidence she'd shown Mrs. Henderson, adding the details of her discoveries in the basement. Brody listened intently, his expression unreadable. As Sarah spoke, a flicker of recognition crossed his face, a subtle shift in his demeanor that betrayed years of suppressed knowledge. "I told everyone she ran away," Brody said, his voice rough and gravelly. It was the easiest explanation, the one that caused the least amount of trouble. "But it wasn't the truth," Sarah countered, her voice steady, unwavering. "What happened to Emily Carter, Sheriff?" Brody remained silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the worn tabletop. He hesitated, considering his words carefully. The silence stretched, taut and suffocating. Before he finally spoke, his voice a low rumble. "There are some things that are better left buried," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Some things that could unravel this whole town." His confession was a revelation, a crack in the wall of silence that had protected Havenwood's dark secret for so long. It was confirmation of Sarah's suspicions, proof that she was on the right track. But it also served as a warning, a chilling reminder of the dangers she faced. She had touched upon a deep-rooted evil, a force that was willing to protect its secrets at any cost. Over the next few days, Sarah continued her investigation, confronting other individuals who had been connected to Emily's disappearance, people whose memories had been carefully shrouded in the veil of time. She discovered that Emily wasn't just a quiet, unassuming girl. She had been involved in something that had threatened the established order of Havenwood. Something that went beyond the confines of her family and into the very heart of the town's close-knit community. Each encounter was fraught with tension, each conversation revealing a new piece of the puzzle, a new layer of the carefully constructed facade. Sarah noted subtle shifts in the townsfolk's demeanor. A nervous twitch, a fleeting glance, an averted gaze, all signs of their concealed knowledge. Their discomfort in her presence was palpable, a testament to the effectiveness of her investigation, the unsettling impact her digging was having on their lives. They knew their carefully crafted silence was crumbling, and the weight of the truth was starting to become unbearable. The townspeople, once friendly and welcoming, began to observe her with a mixture of suspicion and fear. Whispers followed her wherever she went, their tone laced with a mixture of apprehension and veiled threats. The initial friendliness had dissolved into wary distance, a change she felt acutely, a chilling reminder of the forces she was up against. But Sarah pressed on, undeterred. Her determination, fueled by her own innate sense of justice and a growing sense of empathy for Emily, proved to be stronger than the town's collective fear. The tapping on her window, once a source of fear, now served as a constant reminder of her purpose, the driving force propelling her forward, deeper into the heart of the conspiracy, closer to the chilling truth. She knew she was walking a dangerous path, but she was prepared to face whatever came her way. The secrets of Havenwood were hers for the taking, and she wouldn't rest until they were revealed. The truth, she knew, lay buried deep, and its unearthing would forever change the face of Havenwood. The fight had just begun. The unsettling feeling that had begun subtly, prickling at the edges of her awareness, intensified. It wasn't just the lingering sense of being watched, the feeling of unseen eyes boring into her from the shadows. It was something more insidious, a cold dread that seeped into her bones, a chilling presence that seemed to cling to the very air she breathed. The tapping on her window, once a sporadic annoyance, became a nightly ritual, precise and persistent, always at precisely 3:12 a.m., but now it was accompanied by other phenomena, subtle yet unnerving. Objects moved on their own. A book would fall from a shelf. A photograph would slide from its frame. A chair would creak ominously in the dead of night. These weren't mere coincidences. They were deliberate actions, orchestrated by an unseen hand, a chilling presence that seemed to taunt her, to test her resolve. Sarah felt a bone-deep certainty that Emily Carter's spirit was somehow involved, her restless energy manifesting in these unsettling displays. One evening, as she sat at her desk, poring over old town records, a chill wind swept through the room, despite the tightly closed windows. The air grew heavy, thick with a palpable sense of unease. A low humming sound, almost imperceptible, vibrated through the floorboards, resonating deep within her chest. The hairs on her arms stood on end, and a wave of nausea washed over her. Then, she saw it. A fleeting image in the periphery of her vision, a glimpse of a young girl in a white dress, standing silently in the corner of her room. Before Sarah could fully focus, the image vanished, leaving behind only the lingering chill and the suffocating weight of the unseen. The next morning, she found a single wilted daisy on her pillow. Daisies had been Emily's favorite flower, a fact Sarah had learned from Mrs. Henderson. The flower, fresh yet wilting simultaneously, possessed an unnatural fragility, as if it had existed outside the boundaries of normal time. It was a chilling message, a spectral calling card, a clear indication that Emily's presence was far more substantial than a mere memory or a ghost story. The supernatural occurrences became increasingly bolder, more insistent. Shadows flickered in her peripheral vision, whispering voices seemed to call her name in the stillness of the night, and a pervasive sense of icy dread permeated her home. Sarah felt as if she were walking a tightrope between reality and the supernatural, the line blurring with each passing day, each unsettling event pushing her closer to the edge. One night, the tapping on her window intensified. It wasn't just a rhythmic tapping anymore. It was a frantic pounding, a desperate plea for attention. Driven by an instinct she couldn't explain, Sarah rushed to the window, her heart pounding in her chest. As she peered out into the darkness, she saw a faint, ethereal glow emanating from the old oak tree that stood sentinel in her backyard. The glow pulsed rhythmically, mirroring the frantic tapping on her window. Drawn by an irresistible force, Sarah stepped outside. The air was thick with an unnatural energy, a palpable sense of otherworldly presence. As she approached the oak tree, the glow intensified, revealing a faint, shimmering image within its trunk. The image solidified, taking the form of Emily Carter, her pale face etched with sorrow and desperation. Emily didn't speak, but her eyes, wide and pleading, communicated a silent plea for help. A torrent of images flashed through Sarah's mind. Fragmented scenes of Emily's final moments, vivid visions of a struggle, a desperate fight for survival, and the terrible events that had led to her disappearance. The visions were overwhelming, raw, and emotionally charged, leaving Sarah breathless and trembling. The image of Emily faded slowly, leaving Sarah alone in the dark, under the silent watch of the ancient oak. The encounter left an indelible mark on her, deepening her conviction that this wasn't just a simple cold case. It was a supernatural mystery, a haunting that transcended the limitations of time and space. The line between the living and the dead, between reality and the supernatural, had completely dissolved, leaving Sarah inextricably bound to Emily's fate. The town's dark secrets, once cloaked in the veil of the past, were now infused with a chilling aura of the paranormal, making the search for the truth even more perilous and compelling. The next few days were a blur of frantic activity. Sarah delved deeper into Emily's life, seeking clues not just in historical records, but also in the whispers of the town, in the subtle nuances of its haunted atmosphere. She discovered a hidden pattern, a sequence of numbers recurring in several seemingly unrelated events. 3, 12, and 20, the time of the tapping, the age of Emily when she disappeared, and the number of years since her vanishing. This numerical sequence seemed to act as a cryptic key, unlocking a deeper layer of the mystery, hinting at a possible supernatural connection between Emily's disappearance and the unsettling events Sarah was experiencing. She began to interpret the seemingly random paranormal occurrences as coded messages from Emily, each event subtly guiding her toward the truth. The moving objects were not merely random acts of mischief. They were carefully orchestrated clues, leading her closer to a hidden truth, a secret buried beneath the surface of Havenwood's tranquil facade. The wilted daisy, the fleeting image of Emily, the chilling whispers, all were pieces of a larger puzzle, each piece contributing to a terrifying, supernatural narrative. Armed with this new understanding, Sarah intensified her investigation, piecing together the fragmented clues from both the physical and the supernatural realms. She revisited Sheriff Brody, armed with the numerical sequence and a newfound confidence that extended beyond her initial conviction. The sheriff, visibly shaken by the spectral occurrences plaguing Sarah, finally revealed a long-held, closely guarded secret. Emily had been involved in a secretive society, a clandestine group with occult interests. Their practices bordered on the supernatural, invoking entities that were both terrifying and undeniably real. The society's rituals were tied to the ancient oak tree, the focal point of Sarah's supernatural encounters. Their activities, shrouded in secrecy, had been carefully hidden for decades, their malevolent practices concealed by the town's collective silence. Emily had stumbled upon something far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. She had discovered their dark secret, and her subsequent disappearance was a consequence of her unwelcome discovery. The society, desperately trying to protect their actions, had silenced Emily to prevent their secrets from being revealed. The implications were staggering. The supernatural occurrences Sarah had experienced weren't mere coincidences. They were the result of the society's malevolent activities, the dark energy emanating from their rituals. Emily's spirit, trapped between worlds, was desperately trying to warn Sarah, to help her uncover the truth and bring an end to the society's nefarious activities. The fight was no longer just about uncovering a cold case. It was about confronting a powerful, supernatural force that had its roots deeply embedded in the town's history and fabric. The stakes were higher than ever. Sarah was no longer just investigating a mystery. She was embroiled in a battle between good and evil, between the mortal and the supernatural, a battle where the outcome was far from certain. The chilling truth, she now knew, was far more terrifying than she had ever imagined, and the path to unraveling it would be a terrifying journey into the heart of darkness. Sheriff Brody's revelation was a seismic shift, shattering the fragile foundation of Sarah's understanding. The seemingly random supernatural events weren't random at all. They were carefully orchestrated, a macabre puppet show directed by a hidden puppeteer. The occult society, shrouded in secrecy, was the key to unlocking Havenwood's darkest secrets, a secret that reached far beyond Emily's disappearance. The sheriff, his face etched with weariness and regret, revealed fragments of the society's history. It had existed for generations, its members drawn from the town's most prominent families. Families whose names were synonymous with Havenwood's prosperity and respectability. Their rituals, he explained, were designed to tap into a malevolent energy, a dark power that offered wealth, influence, and longevity. But the price, he whispered, was steep, a price paid in lives and souls. Emily, in her innocent curiosity, had stumbled upon their clandestine activities, uncovering evidence of their horrific practices. She had discovered a hidden ledger detailing their sacrifices, a horrifying record of lives extinguished in the pursuit of unnatural power. The society, terrified of exposure, had silenced her, making her disappearance look like a tragic accident. They had succeeded in covering their tracks for 20 years, their dark deeds buried beneath layers of deceit and carefully constructed lies. The sheriff's confession was only the beginning. Sarah, armed with this new knowledge, began to see the town through a different lens. A lens that revealed a tapestry of deception woven into the fabric of Havenwood's idyllic existence. She revisited old newspaper clippings, scrutinizing obituaries and articles for any unusual patterns, any subtle hints that could confirm the sheriff's account. She discovered a series of unexplained deaths, accidents deemed unfortunate coincidences by the town, but which now seemed suspiciously connected to the society's activities. One particular article caught her attention: the death of old Mr. Abernethy, a respected elder who had mysteriously died in his sleep 20 years ago. His death was ruled as a heart attack, but Sarah noticed an unsettling detail: the time of his death, precisely 3:12 a.m., the same time the tapping began on her window. This coincidence couldn't be dismissed. She delved deeper into Mr. Abernethy's life, uncovering a link to the society through a long-forgotten photograph depicting him among other prominent townspeople, all bearing unsettlingly similar facial expressions devoid of emotion. The same eerie likeness appeared in other photographs of Havenwood's elite, a subtle, chilling expression that hinted at a shared secret, a shared complicity in the society's dark rituals. Sarah meticulously studied the photographs, comparing facial features, analyzing subtle nuances, and eventually recognizing a recurring symbol subtly imprinted on some of the background objects. It was a stylized daisy, similar to the wilted flower she'd have found on her pillow. This recurring symbol, a cryptic signature of the occult society, tied these influential figures together, confirming their involvement in the conspiracy. Her investigation extended beyond the photographs. Sarah began to suspect that the seemingly accidental deaths weren't merely coincidences. She noticed that the victims had all held positions of power or had knowledge that could have compromised the society's secrets. Each death, carefully orchestrated to appear accidental, ensured their silence and preserved the society's clandestine activities. Her investigation became a desperate race against time. The society, sensing that their carefully constructed facade was crumbling, intensified its efforts to silence Sarah. The supernatural events escalated, becoming more menacing, more threatening. The tapping on her window became a relentless pounding. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and the shadows danced with an unnerving malevolence. She felt a constant, chilling presence, a suffocating dread that mirrored the growing urgency of her investigation. One evening, while poring over town records in the library, Sarah discovered a hidden compartment in an old cabinet, revealing a collection of diaries. The diaries, written in elegant script, belonged to several prominent members of the society. They chronicled their dark rituals, their pursuit of power, and their chilling indifference to human life. The diaries contained detailed accounts of their meetings at the old oak tree in Sarah's backyard, its ancient roots serving as a conduit to the malevolent energy they sought to harness. The diaries also confirmed the significance of the numerical sequence 3, 12, and 20, a cryptic code interwoven into their rituals, a timeline of their sacrifices. The diaries revealed a chilling truth: the society's power was waning. Their rituals, once effective, were now backfiring, unleashing a malevolent force that threatened to consume Havenwood. Emily's death was not simply a silencing, but a sacrifice, an attempt to appease the darkening energy they had unleashed. Her spirit, bound to the town, was not only trying to warn Sarah, but also desperately trying to find a way to break free from the society's malevolent influence. As Sarah read through the chilling details, she realized the horrifying truth about the town's supposed prosperity. The wealth and influence of Havenwood's elite were built on a foundation of darkness, sustained by sacrifices and fueled by a malevolent energy. The town's idyllic facade was merely a deceptive veil, concealing a dark secret that had been carefully nurtured for generations. Sarah understood that she wasn't just uncovering a cold case. She was confronting a malevolent force deeply rooted in the heart of Havenwood. The society, weakened by their dwindling power, was desperate. They knew she was onto them, and they would stop at nothing to silence her permanently. Her discovery meant risking her life as well as the lives of those around her. The line between the supernatural and the real was blurring, creating a chilling atmosphere of uncertainty and fear. Her next move was calculated, deliberate, and driven by a desperate need to expose the truth. She decided to make her findings public, hoping to expose the conspiracy and bring down the occult society before they could claim another victim. The only way to fight the darkness, she realized, was to expose it to the light. She knew that alerting the authorities alone would not be sufficient. The society had deep roots within the town's infrastructure. The police, likely, were either complicit or entirely unaware of the truth. Sarah knew the inherent risks. Exposing the society meant confronting a powerful force that had operated in the shadows for generations. It meant risking her life, putting herself directly in the crosshairs of a desperate and malevolent group. Yet, the knowledge of the truth, the burden of Emily's unfinished story, and the looming threat to the town fueled her resolve. The fight for justice, for truth, for the souls trapped by the society's malevolent practices, was a fight she was prepared to fight. Her actions would determine not only her fate, but the fate of Havenwood itself. The climax was near, the unraveling of the conspiracy imminent, and the battle for the town's soul was about to begin. The I commands rewrite quick edit, ask Squibbler, heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, heading 5, heading 6 normal text Adobe Caslin, Prostons, Seriferial Australian, Sunset Bembo Century, Schoolbook Courier Franklin, Gothic, Medium Futura Garamund, Premier Pro Georgiate, Baskerville Jansen Laura Minion, Propalatino Papyrus Times, New Roman, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 18, 20, 24, 30, 36, 48, 60, 72, 96, 1.0, 120, 1.5, 161.82, 2.4, 283.04, 05.0, the old oak tree in Sarah's backyard stood sentinel, its gnarled branches reaching towards the bruised twilight sky. It was here, according to the diaries, that the society held their most significant rituals, harnessing the earth's energy, or so they believed. Sarah stood beneath its shadow, a chilling wind whispering through the leaves, a sound that seemed to mimic the frantic beating of her heart. She hadn't gone to the tree to confront the society as a whole. That would be suicidal. Instead, her target was Martha Blackwood, the seemingly innocuous librarian, a woman whose gentle smile and quiet demeanor hid a darkness that ran deeper than any ancient roots. Martha, according to the diaries, was the key, the conduit through which the society channeled its malevolent energy. She was not simply a member. She was the orchestrator, the puppet master pulling the strings of Havenwood's terrifying charade. Sarah had followed Martha for days, observing her routines, her movements, studying her like a hawk studying its prey. She knew the risks, knew that confronting Martha alone was a gamble with death as the ultimate stake. But the alternative, letting Martha continue her reign of terror, was simply unacceptable. The air crackled with an unseen energy, a palpable tension that settled upon Sarah like a shroud. She approached the tree cautiously, the rustling leaves a constant reminder of the unseen eyes watching her. The ground beneath her feet felt oddly cold, a chilling contrast to the warmth of the setting sun. As she drew closer to the tree's base, she noticed a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer in the air, a swirling mist that seemed to pulse with an unnatural light. This was the conduit, the focal point of the society's dark rituals. Martha emerged from the shadows, her gentle smile replaced by a chillingly cold expression. Her eyes, usually soft and kind, were now glacial, devoid of warmth, radiating a malevolent energy that sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. She was taller than Sarah expected, her slight frame giving way to an unexpected strength in her posture. Strength that spoke volumes about the power she wielded. "You shouldn't have come here, Sarah," Martha said, her voice a low, chilling whisper that carried on the wind. Her words were laced with an icy calmness that belied the lethal intent in her eyes. Sarah stood her ground, her fear masked by a fierce determination. "I know what you've done, Martha," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "I know about Emily, about Mr. Abernathy, about all the others." Martha chuckled, a dry, rasping sound devoid of humor. "Oh, you know so much, don't you? But do you truly understand the power we wield? You're stealing energy, life force, from the town," Sarah countered, her voice rising slightly. "You're feeding on people's fears, their hopes, their very essence." Martha stepped closer, her eyes boring into Sarah's. "We are merely taking what is rightfully ours. Havenwood has always been ours. It was given to us, generation after generation, And you, Sarah, are trespassing. This isn't some twisted inheritance, Sarah retorted, taking another step forward. This is murder, manipulation. You're killing people for your own selfish gain. It's a sacrifice, Martha corrected, her voice dropping to a near whisper. A necessary sacrifice to maintain the balance. To protect Havenwood from something far worse. What are you talking about? Sarah demanded. Martha raised a hand, a faint, almost invisible glow emanating from her fingertips. There are forces at work in this world, Sarah, that you cannot comprehend. Forces far older and more powerful than anything you could imagine. We are merely custodians. The air shimmered again, the swirling mist intensifying, creating a vortex of unnatural energy. Sarah felt a pull, a force trying to drag her into the vortex, into the heart of the ancient energy Martha controlled. But she resisted, her will hardening, her fear giving way to anger. Emily didn't deserve this, Sarah screamed, pushing back against the unseen force. None of them did. Martha's face contorted in anger. She was reckless. She interfered. She had to be silenced. Confrontation escalated, a deadly game of cat and mouse, a battle of wills played out beneath the ancient oak. Sarah, fueled by rage and determination, fought against Martha's malevolent power, dodging the invisible attacks, weaving through the swirling energy. Martha's attacks were subtle, insidious, aimed at undermining Sarah's resolve, at breaking her spirit. But Sarah held firm, her anger fueling her strength, her determination giving her an edge. The fight wasn't physical. It was a battle of wills, a war fought in the realm of the supernatural. Sarah used her knowledge of the society's rituals, the cryptic symbols, the numerical sequences, as weapons, turning their own arcane knowledge against them. She chanted counterspells, drawing on her own inner strength, her own connection to the land, to fight against Martha's manipulation. The battle raged for what felt like hours, the air thick with energy, the ground vibrating under their feet. The swirling mist grew more intense, the energy crackling and popping like 1,000 tiny sparks. Sarah felt the drain on her own energy, the relentless pressure of Martha's power, but she refused to yield. Finally, in a climactic moment, Sarah discovered Martha's weakness. It wasn't a physical vulnerability, but a flaw in her magical prowess, a crack in the facade of her seemingly impenetrable power. Sarah, seizing the opportunity, channeled all her remaining energy, focusing her will, and unleashed a powerful counterattack, a wave of pure, righteous energy that struck Martha with unexpected force. Martha screamed, a raw, pained sound that echoed through the night. The shimmering mist dissipated, the swirling energy collapsing in on itself. Martha stumbled back, her face pale, her eyes filled with a mixture of shock and defeat. The power she had wielded for so long, the power that had controlled Havenwood for generations, was gone. Broken. As the light of dawn broke through the trees, casting long shadows across the grass, Sarah stood over Martha's defeated form. She hadn't killed her, but she had broken her, shattered her control, exposing her to the light. The nightmare was over, at least for now. The ancient oak stood silent, its energy spent, its power neutralized. The chilling whispers ceased, replaced by the sweet melody of morning birdsong. Sarah's victory was bittersweet. She had won the battle, but the scars of Havenwood's dark secret would remain, a testament to the malevolent power that had held the town captive for so long. The fight for Havenwood, for justice, and for the peace of those lost souls had only just begun. The true resolution, the complete restoration of balance, remained a task for another day. The future held an uncertain peace, but for now, the darkness had been driven back. Martha's defeat wasn't a clean break. It was a crumbling of a meticulously constructed facade. As the swirling vortex dissipated, revealing the pale dawn light filtering through the ancient oak's branches, the true horror began to seep into Sarah's understanding. Martha, weakened but not broken, began to speak, her voice a frail echo of the chilling whisper she had used moments before. It wasn't about power, Sarah, she rasped, her breath catching in her throat. It was about protection. Sarah stared at her, her heart pounding a rhythm of disbelief and dawning horror. Protection. From what? The previous night's struggle had been a battle for the soul of Havenwood, a clash between good and evil. But Martha's words painted a far more complex picture. A terrifying tapestry woven from threads of ancient secrets and unimaginable threats. Martha's confession was a torrent of chilling revelations, a cascade of dark history that washed over Sarah, leaving her breathless and shaken. She spoke of a lineage dating back centuries, a secret society sworn to protect Havenwood, not from its own inhabitants, but from something far older and more sinister. Something that lurked beneath the surface of the town, something that fed on the life force of the living, not through ritualistic sacrifice, as Sarah had initially believed, but through a parasitic existence, a subtle draining of energy that went unnoticed, undetected, until it was too late. Emily Carter, Martha explained, hadn't been a sacrifice. She had been a threat. Emily had stumbled upon the truth, discovered the true nature of the entity that existed beneath Havenwood, and in her naive attempt to expose it, she had become a target. Her disappearance, Martha claimed, was not a murder, but a necessary containment, a desperate measure to prevent the ancient evil from breaking free. The Polaroids, the tapping on Sarah's window. These weren't warnings or threats, attempts to steer Sarah away from the truth, to keep her from unknowingly unleashing the entity upon the unsuspecting town. It was a chilling realization, a twist of the knife that dug deep into Sarah's already wounded psyche. The sacrifices, Martha explained, were not intended to fuel a society's power, but to appease the entity. Small, controlled sacrifices of life force, she claimed, were the only thing that kept it dormant, trapped beneath the foundations of Havenwood. Mr. Abernethy, the others mentioned in the diary, were all individuals who had unwittingly come too close to the truth, individuals who had to be silenced to prevent the entity's awakening. The rituals, the strange symbols, the numerical sequences, all part of a complex system designed to keep the entity contained, to maintain a fragile, uneasy peace. The story of Havenwood's origins, as revealed by Martha, plunged far deeper than Sarah could have ever imagined. It wasn't merely a tale of a shadowy society, it was a story etched in the very fabric of the land, a legacy of dark magic and unimaginable horrors. According to Martha, the town itself was built on an ancient burial ground, a place of immense power, where a malevolent entity, trapped for centuries, waited to be unleashed. The energy that Sarah had felt beneath the ancient oak was a mere fraction of the entity's power, a faint echo of its terrifying presence. The society, Martha claimed, was not an evil organization, as Sarah had initially believed. Instead, it was a desperate, centuries-old order tasked with a horrific responsibility: to contain the entity, to protect Havenwood from an ancient, unspeakable evil. They weren't feeding on the townspeople. They were feeding the entity, offering small sacrifices to keep it subdued, to maintain the precarious balance that had kept Havenwood safe for so long. Their methods were brutal, morally reprehensible, but their motives, however misguided, were rooted in a desperate attempt to safeguard the town from an existential threat. The chilling realization struck Sarah like a physical blow. The battle she had fought wasn't simply a fight against evil. It was a fight against a necessary evil, a fight that could unleash something far more terrifying. By defeating Martha, by shattering the society's control, Sarah had potentially weakened the very thing that kept Havenwood safe. The weight of this new understanding bore heavily upon her. The dawn light, once a symbol of hope and victory, now felt cold and foreboding. She had won a battle, but she had also potentially lost the war. Martha's confession continued, painting a vivid portrait of the entity. It wasn't a sentient being in the traditional sense. It was more of a parasitic force, an ancient darkness that fed on life energy, its power fueled by fear and desperation. It existed in the shadows, lurking beneath the surface of the world. Its presence felt only in subtle whispers, in chilling drafts, and in the lingering sense of unease that permeated Havenwood. Its true form, Martha warned, was something beyond human comprehension, something that defied description and understanding. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting its golden rays through the trees, Sarah felt a new wave of terror wash over her. She had stumbled into something far older and more terrifying than any simple town conspiracy. She had fought a battle against a necessary evil, and in her victory, she might have unleashed something truly monstrous upon Havenwood. The revelation of the true antagonist brought a chilling closure to the immediate mystery of Emily's disappearance. It wasn't Martha's personal malice, but the desperate necessity to protect Havenwood from a far greater threat. However, this resolution only opened a terrifying new chapter, casting Sarah into a far more profound and potentially catastrophic mystery. The fight for Havenwood had only just begun, a fight that would not only determine the fate of the town, but also the survival of those around her. Sarah left Martha not as a captive, but as a witness to the events that had transpired, a silent guardian of Havenwood's terrifying secret. Martha's role, now, was not as an antagonist, but as an unlikely ally, her knowledge invaluable in the looming battle against the unseen evil that now threatened to consume them all. The sun, now fully risen, cast a pale light across the town, a stark contrast to the ominous shadows that still lingered in Sarah's heart. The quiet, suburban streets of Havenwood held a new chilling secret, a truth that threatened to shatter the illusion of peace, replacing it with a nightmarish reality. Sarah knew, with a growing sense of dread, that the true battle was just beginning. The fight to save Havenwood was not a simple confrontation. It was a desperate struggle against an ancient darkness that had waited centuries for its chance to rise. The chilling truth, as Martha revealed it, wasn't simply a tale of a secretive society enacting brutal rituals. It was a terrifying symbiosis between the mundane and the supernatural, a conspiracy woven into the very fabric of Havenwood's existence. The entity, she explained, wasn't some malevolent spirit conjured through dark magic. It was something far older, something primordial, a parasitic force that predated the town, the state, perhaps even humanity itself. It existed not in a realm separate from our own, but intertwined with it, feeding off the life force of the living, drawing sustenance from their fears, their anxieties, their very essence. Martha described it as an etheric leech, a being without form, without a discernible body in the conventional sense. Instead, it manifested as a pervasive unease, a subtle draining of energy, a chilling draft that never quite disappeared, a persistent feeling of being watched, even when alone. Its power was amplified by darkness, by fear, by secrets kept hidden in the shadows. This explained the ritualistic sacrifices, not as fuel for some dark ceremony, but as appeasement offerings, small controlled releases of life force to keep the entity sated, to prevent it from growing stronger, from breaking free from its subterranean prison. The Polaroid pictures, the tapping on Sarah's window, these weren't mere acts of intimidation. They were warnings, subtle attempts to nudge Sarah away from the truth, to prevent her from unknowingly disrupting the precarious balance that had held Havenwood captive for centuries. The entity, Martha explained, wasn't aware of its captors, nor did it actively seek them out. Its existence was purely parasitic, a mindless hunger that only knew how to consume. The society's actions were less a conscious manipulation and more a desperate, centuries-old dance of appeasement, a delicate balance between survival and annihilation. The town itself played a crucial role in this macabre dance. Havenwood, Martha revealed, was built upon an ancient burial ground, a place of immense power, a nexus point where the veil between worlds was thin, where the entity's influence was strongest. The very earth beneath Havenwood pulsed with its dark energy, a constant hum of unease that permeated the town's atmosphere, influencing its inhabitants on a subconscious level. This explained the town's pervasive sense of quiet dread, the unspoken anxieties that clung to every conversation, every interaction. The town wasn't simply a setting for the mystery. It was an active participant, a living vessel for the entity's power. The numerical sequences Sarah had found in Emily's diary, the strange symbols etched into the basement walls. These weren't random markings. They were components of a complex system of containment, a sigil-like network designed to keep the entity bound to its prison. The numbers, Martha explained, represented specific frequencies of energy, calculated to resonate with the entity's own power, subtly neutralizing its influence, preventing its expansion. The symbols were a visual representation of these frequencies, acting as anchors, binding the entity to its subterranean domain. The seemingly random rituals were crucial in maintaining this precarious balance. The society's methods were, admittedly, brutal and morally questionable. They sacrificed individuals not out of malice, out of a grim necessity. They silenced those who came too close to the truth, not out of a desire for secrecy, but out of a desperate need to protect the town from utter annihilation. Each sacrifice was a calculated decision, a painful but necessary act to appease the entity, buying Havenwood more time. The society wasn't a group of villains, but a desperate group of guardians, burdened with a responsibility so horrific it warped their morality, their humanity. Sarah now understood the full weight of her actions. By defeating Martha, she hadn't simply triumphed over an antagonist. She had potentially unleashed something far more terrifying. The society's methods, however brutal, were the only thing preventing Havenwood's complete destruction. The uneasy peace, the fragile balance, was shattered, and the ancient entity, deprived of its appeasements, was likely to awaken with a vengeance. This wasn't just a mystery anymore. It was a struggle for survival, a desperate fight against a force beyond comprehension. Sarah's quest for answers had led her to a horrifying truth, a truth that demanded not only bravery and cunning, but also a difficult moral compromise. She had to find a way to contain the entity, to restore the balance, perhaps even without the help of the secretive society she had initially sought to destroy. She was no longer a detective solving a cold case. She was a warrior fighting for the very soul of Havenwood. The sun, now high in the sky, cast long shadows across the town, shadows that seemed to writhe and shift, mirroring the unsettling energy that pulsed beneath the surface. The quiet suburban streets held a secret darker than any Sarah could have imagined, a secret that threatened to consume the town, to swallow it whole. The sense of unease that had previously been a subtle undercurrent now felt overwhelming, a palpable force pressing down on Havenwood, a suffocating weight of ancient evil. Sarah felt a chilling dread, not only for herself, but for everyone in Havenwood. The entity's awakening wasn't a hypothetical threat anymore. It was imminent. The fight she faced wasn't against flesh and blood, against a single antagonist, but against a primordial force that existed beyond human understanding. The battle for Havenwood was far from over. It was only just beginning. The following days were a blur of desperate activity. Sarah, armed with Martha's confession and her own growing understanding of the supernatural elements, worked tirelessly to decipher the cryptic clues left behind by Emily and the secretive society. She revisited the ancient oak, the focal point of the entity's energy, sensing its ominous pulse beneath the earth. This time, it was not a whisper of unease, but a throbbing pressure, a palpable dread that made her skin crawl. The symbols etched into the ancient oak seemed to writhe before her eyes, their meaning slowly unfolding in her mind. She discovered hidden compartments in Emily's diary, containing intricate sketches and diagrams revealing the intricate system of containment employed by the society. They weren't merely appeasing the entity, they were also actively suppressing it, channeling its energy through the intricate network of symbols and numerical sequences, preventing it from breaking free from its subterranean prison. The whole town, Sarah realized, was a complex network of containment, a vast, unconscious sigil designed to keep the ancient entity at bay. The seemingly ordinary streets, the houses, even the town's layout, it was all part of a larger design, a protective barrier against the encroaching darkness. The knowledge filled Sarah with a mixture of fear and determination. She was no longer just a teenager solving a mystery. She was a guardian, entrusted with protecting the town from a nightmare far beyond her comprehension. She had to find a way to restore the damaged system of containment, to strengthen the barriers before the entity completely broke free. Time was running out. She sought out the old town archives, poring over dusty documents, ancient maps, and forgotten legends. She discovered that the entity was not merely a nameless horror, but had a history stretching back to the town's earliest days. It was a creature of darkness, born from a primordial chaos that predated even the earliest settlements in Havenwood. It had been trapped, imprisoned beneath the town, but its influence had always lingered, a subtle presence that permeated the lives of the inhabitants. This explained the town's history of unusual events, the recurring tragedies, the unexplained disappearances, which had previously been dismissed as coincidences or folklore. The more Sarah learned, the more daunting the task became. The entity wasn't just an evil spirit, it was a force of nature, a primordial darkness that threatened to consume everything in its path. The secretive society, despite its brutality, had performed a vital function, maintaining a fragile balance that kept Havenwood safe. By shattering that balance, Sarah had unleashed a catastrophic threat. Now, she had to find a way to repair it, to restore the protective system before it was too late. The fate of Havenwood, and perhaps the world, rested on her shoulders. The confrontation wasn't over. It was just beginning. A desperate race against time to contain an ancient evil. A struggle that would test her courage, her intellect, and her very soul. The resolution lay not in simple victory, but in understanding the complex interplay of the supernatural and the mundane. A chilling truth that would redefine her understanding of the world and her place within it. The quiet streets of Havenwood held a secret far more terrifying than a simple cold case. It held the key to survival, a key that Sarah must find before the darkness consumed them all. The confrontation with Martha had left Sarah drained, but a strange sense of calm settled over her. The immediate danger was gone, but the weight of her discovery pressed heavily on her shoulders. Havenwood was safe, for now, but the fragile peace was a thin veneer over a chasm of ancient evil, a truth that had irrevocably altered her perception of the world. Town, once a quiet haven, now pulsed with a low hum of suppressed energy, a constant reminder of the monstrous entity slumbering beneath its streets. The days following Martha's confession were a whirlwind of activity. Sheriff Thompson, initially skeptical, had finally accepted the bizarre truth, his hardened features etched with a weariness that reflected the weight of Havenwood's dark secret. He mobilized the town, subtly incorporating the necessary rituals into the community's life, replacing the clandestine sacrifices with symbolic acts of appeasement, carefully devised based on Sarah's understanding of the containment system. The old oak tree, the nexus of the entity's power, became a focal point. Sarah, guided by Emily's diagrams, oversaw the restoration of the protective sigils etched into its ancient bark. The community, once fractured by suspicion and fear, now worked together, united by a shared purpose, protecting their town from the abyss that threatened to swallow it whole. The meticulous process of repairing the damaged sigils was painstaking, each symbol painstakingly redrawn, each numerical sequence meticulously verified. The task demanded not just physical labor, but also a deep understanding of the interconnectedness of the symbols, a knowledge Sarah possessed thanks to her investigation, and Martha's fragmented revelations. The process involved much more than mere symbols. The very layout of Havenwood, Sarah discovered, was part of the protective system. Certain streets, buildings, even the placement of trees, were strategically positioned to channel the entity's energy, preventing it from accumulating and breaching its subterranean prison. This understanding required a complete reimagining of the town, not just physically, but psychologically. The townsfolk, initially hesitant, gradually adapted their routines, their movements subconsciously shifting to reinforce the protective grid that had been unknowingly maintained for centuries. They learned to move within a rhythm. a dance around the invisible currents of energy, their lives now intricately interwoven with the ancient ritual of containment. The restoration wasn't merely a physical undertaking, it was a spiritual one. As the symbols were repaired, a tangible shift occurred in the town's atmosphere. The oppressive dread that had clung to Havenwood began to lift, replaced by a tentative hope, a fragile sense of unity. The subtle shifts in the energy currents were palpable. Sarah felt the oppressive weight lift with each newly restored symbol, the pulsating dread at the heart of the town gradually subsiding. The quiet hum of unease lessened, replaced by a slow, almost hesitant, turn to normalcy. Sarah's role wasn't limited to repairing the physical aspects of the containment system. She became a bridge, connecting the older generation, steeped in the traditions of the secretive society, with the younger generation, initially ignorant of their town's terrifying secret. She patiently explained the delicate balance, the necessity of the rituals, the profound responsibility that rested upon them. The older residents, relieved to have someone finally understand the truth, shared their knowledge, passing down generations of carefully guarded secrets. The young people, initially shocked and frightened, found strength in their newfound understanding, taking on the responsibility with a newfound maturity, acknowledging the duty that came with inheriting Havenwood's dark legacy. The healing process wasn't instantaneous. The fear lingered, a subtle undercurrent beneath the surface of everyday life. But it was no longer paralyzing. It was tempered by knowledge, by understanding, by shared responsibility. Havenwood was slowly, tentatively, learning to live with its monstrous secret, learning to dance with the darkness that slept beneath its streets. Sarah's own transformation was remarkable. The girl who had once been haunted by a simple tapping on her window had become a guardian, a protector of her town, a keeper of its terrible secret. She had faced unimaginable horror, stared into the abyss, and emerged stronger, wiser, and deeply changed. The experience stripped her of her childhood innocence, but it also bestowed upon her an inner strength she never knew she possessed. The fear remained, but it was no longer debilitating. It was a constant companion, a reminder of the fragility of life, the terrible power of secrets kept hidden. The cold case of Emily Carter was finally solved, though its resolution brought little solace. Emily's fate was tragic, a grim sacrifice to maintain the precarious balance. But her death, once a symbol of the town's darkness, became a symbol of its resilience, a testament to the enduring power of community in the face of unimaginable horror. Sarah established a small memorial for Emily, a quiet tribute to the girl whose sacrifice had inadvertently saved Havenwood. The memorial served not just as a reminder of Emily's tragedy, but also a silent acknowledgement of the generations who had borne the town's burden in secret. The town of Havenwood, however, never fully escaped the shadow of its past. The chilling truth of its origins continued to shape its identity, its history a tapestry woven from threads of darkness and light. Sarah understood that the fight wasn't over. It was a perpetual vigilance, a constant dance with the darkness, a responsibility she willingly accepted. The quiet streets of Havenwood would always hold a subtle tremor of unease, a faint echo of the ancient entity slumbering beneath its surface. Sarah's life was forever altered, forever bound to the town and its dark secret. She knew that the entity remained, a constant, unseen presence. But the fear was replaced by a strange sense of acceptance, a quiet understanding of the precarious balance that sustained Havenwood's existence. Her journey, though harrowing, had instilled in her a profound sense of responsibility, a deep connection to the town she had saved, and a maturity that came from confronting the most profound darkness. The mystery had ended, but the story of Havenwood, its people, and the entity that haunted them continued to unfold, its chapters unwritten, its future uncertain, but its past indelibly marked by a chilling truth and the courage of one young woman who confronted it. The town began to heal, but the scars remained, a poignant reminder of the terrifying secret that lay beneath the seemingly peaceful streets of Havenwood. The resolution wasn't a simple happy ending, but a fragile peace, hard-earned and constantly guarded. The autumn leaves, crimson and gold, crunched under Sarah's boots as she walked away from Havenwood. It wasn't a fleeing, it was a departure, a necessary step toward a future that, until recently, had felt impossibly distant. The town, once a source of terrifying nightmares, now held a complicated place in her heart, a mixture of dread, gratitude, and a profound sense of responsibility. She carried the weight of its secrets, a burden she couldn't quite shed, but one she was no longer crushed beneath. The old Victorian house, once a prison of shadows and whispered dread, now stood silent behind her. It wasn't the same house. The very essence of it had shifted with the rituals, with the repairing of the sigils, with the slow, painstaking process of healing that had followed Martha's confession. The rhythmic tapping at 3:12 a.m. was gone, replaced by the quiet rustle of the wind and the newly restored oak tree. That tree, the nexus of the entity's power, now stood as a testament to Havenwood's resilience, its ancient bark bearing the renewed protective symbols, like scars that told the story of survival. The journey hadn't been easy. The nightmares still came, but they were less vivid, less terrifying. They were memories now, fading echoes of the horror she'd faced. Therapy had helped, slowly chipping away at the trauma, providing the tools to navigate the lingering anxiety and the inescapable memories. She learned to recognize the triggers, the subtle shifts in her breathing, the tightening in her chest, and to consciously manage her response. It was a slow process, a marathon rather than a sprint, but she was making progress. She was learning to live with the scars, both visible and invisible. Her relationship with her parents had undergone a seismic shift. The initial disbelief had given way to a hesitant acceptance, a quiet understanding that the events weren't a figment of her imagination. They couldn't comprehend the full extent of the supernatural elements, but they had finally acknowledged the reality of the danger, the truth behind the cold case that had haunted Havenwood for decades. The unspoken understanding between them was fragile, but it was a start, a bond forged in shared experience and mutual acceptance. Sarah's new beginning wasn't a clean break from the past. It was a deliberate move towards a future where she could process her experiences and integrate them into her life, without being consumed by them. She enrolled in a university far from Havenwood, a place where she could start anew, where the chilling memories wouldn't be triggered by every familiar sight or sound. The anonymity of a large city felt strangely comforting, a contrast to the suffocating closeness of Havenwood, where every face held a shared secret, where every street echoed with the ghosts of the past. The bustling campus life, initially overwhelming, gradually became a welcome distraction. The academic rigor, the challenges of balancing her studies with her personal life, provided a structure, a focus for her energy, a way to channel her anxiety into something productive. She found solace in the anonymity of academic life. The faces of her classmates were fresh and unknown, holding no connection to the dark secret that defined her past. She embraced the opportunity to build new relationships, friendships built on shared interests rather than shared trauma. Her creative writing classes became a surprising outlet for her experiences. She poured her feelings, her anxieties, and her lingering fear onto the page, shaping them into narratives that explored the themes of trauma, resilience, and the enduring power of the human spirit. It was a cathartic process, a way to grapple with her emotions, to explore the darkness without being consumed by it. She found a newfound passion in her writing, a channel for her creativity that was both satisfying and therapeutic. The stories she wrote weren't direct reflections of Havenwood, but they carried echoes of its unsettling truth. The city offered a sense of anonymity, a stark contrast to the claustrophobic familiarity of Havenwood. She enjoyed the bustling crowds, the diversity of cultures, and the feeling of being just one face in a sea of millions. Yet she sometimes felt an unsettling emptiness. The absence of the shared, heavy secret of Havenwood created a void she didn't expect. It was a feeling she hadn't anticipated, a strange kind of loneliness despite her attempts to build new friendships. This loneliness, she realized, wasn't a rejection of Havenwood. Instead, It was a recognition of the unique bond that existed between her and her former community. The scars remained, a constant, silent reminder of her experiences. The nightmares subsided, but their echoes persisted in her dreams. She carried the burden of Havenwood's secret, a responsibility that weighed heavily on her soul. But the burden was different now. It was no longer debilitating, but an acceptance of her past, the knowledge that it shaped who she was. This knowledge did not define her, but it guided her. She had changed, indelibly marked by her experiences, yet stronger, more resilient. She had confronted the darkness, stared into the abyss, and found the strength to emerge into the light. Sarah's new beginning wasn't a rejection of the past, but a conscious step toward a future where she could live with the memories, process the trauma, and integrate her experiences into a fulfilling life. The haunting secrets of Havenwood would always be a part of her, but they wouldn't define her. She had found healing, not in forgetting, but in remembering, in understanding, and in accepting that the past was merely a stepping stone toward a brighter future. The journey had been harrowing, the road fraught with peril, but she had reached her destination. The scars of Havenwood would always remain a poignant reminder of the darkness she faced and the strength she found within herself. The end of the mystery was not a happy ending, but a beginning.